Let me pitch you a superhero movie. Okay, so there's a team of outsiders with superpowers, and they band together to fight off evil forces trying to take over the world. Think Super Friends, but of course different, more serious, more real world type of vibe. This movie is authentic, gritty, and even though we're dealing with unrealistic superpowers, it should feel naturalistic, like naturalistic as hell, man. So about my team of superheroes, there's a guy with like horns that shoot lasers, a gal who can summon birds to fight for her, and she can fly too. There's another fellow who's a shapeshifter, and a young girl who joins the group who can heal anyone with her touch, though she can't revive the dead, and the graver the injury she heals, the longer it takes her to recover. So, okay, so what do these heroes look like? Well, they're all clowns. Yeah, like big rainbow wigs, red apple noses, giant fucking shoes, lapel flowers that squirt water, a honking sound whenever they move or do anything. I'm calling it Clown Force 4. So why are you laughing? This is a serious, gritty superhero drama. There's no humor. The story is important to me. The script gets at the heart of what it means to be human, to be good, and it does it with gravitas. Every pie they take to the face, every overcrowded VW bug they scramble out of, every animal balloon they twist into form will challenge and move the audience to tears even. So that's my movie pitch. I thought of it the other night while watching a similar film called The Exorcist. There are no clowns in The Exorcist, but there kind of are. The heroes of this movie are Catholic priests who shoot invisible holy lasers from books to try to stop their arch nemesis Satan, whose superpower is simply to exaggerate the behavior of a preteen girl who's starting puberty. You know, she starts cussing and being rude. Sometimes there are liquids emerging that didn't emerge before. She even exudes a sexuality that was certainly not approved by any adult. And for a middle-aged male creative team, that's very scary. True horror, these girls becoming autonomous women. I will insert the entry of the Gladiator song here. I won't. Listen, before we start this episode, I want to assure you, listeners and Cecil both, that while I find The Exorcist, personally, a perfectly executed film with the dumbest premise and plot, I will remember Roses and Thorns. I will find my shining lights. And I won't constantly quote Beetlejuice. I've seen The Exorcist about 167 times, and it keeps getting funnier every single time I see it because I've only seen it 3 times, but it does keep getting funnier. And I will remember throughout this episode that taste and horror are truly subjective. Just because I find demon possession stories to be as unintentionally silly as Clown Force 4, it doesn't mean everyone has to feel this way. Hi, Cecil.
Hi, Jeffrey.
What's an old movie? Old is subjective here. Well, just an older movie that still makes you laugh every time you see it.
That still makes me laugh every time I
Is
see it.
is there a movie you could put on? It doesn't have to be unintentionally funny. It could be intentionally. But is there a movie you could put on you'd still find it funny even though it's
Oh
more than
man.
20 years old or something?
Oh man, that's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
Because comedy doesn't age well, I
Mm-mm.
find. It's hard to find those comedies that,
Mm-hmm.
especially after you see it once, you're like, oh my gosh, that's the best. And then you go back and watch it again, you're like, I still find this funny. Um, what I'm trying to think of the name of the sort of upstairs downstairs Robert Altman film. Uh, um,
Oh,
it's that's not Downton Abbey. That's the proto Downton Abbey.
Gosford Park.
Gosford Park, for whatever reason, and I've seen Gosford Park. It's like kind of a bit of a rainy day comfort movie. Like if I'm feeling sick,
Uh-huh.
it's just something about it that is just so funny and
Yeah,
tragic. It's funny and tragic,
that's
but
a good one. I should
but
revisit
Maggie
that.
Smith, essentially like anything Maggie Smith says, I'm like, oh, she got me.
Uh, I've said it before, and I can't remember the last movie we did that I just didn't, I just found it kind of a slog. And so what I did was I switched to one of my favorite classic comedy psychological horror movies, which is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Okay.
And there's always a line in it. And that's a comedy to me that sort of lasts, I think, just because the humor is so much in the craft of writing and
Oh yeah.
the actor's delivery of it. And it's super mean, and I feel like mean humor is universal.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
If you
Watching people
existed,
completely, yes,
yeah, if you
yes, if you
existed, I'd
existed,
divorce you.
oh my God. Watching people's marriage fall apart in front of their eyes,
Uh,
trying to destroy other people
uh,
or simultaneously sleep with other people while
Mm-hmm.
also destroying them. Who doesn't get a laugh out of that?
Oh, me. I get so many laughs out of that. So yeah, I watched this movie over the course of 3 nights.
Three.
I got tired watching this movie. And I think I've mentioned before that I saw this movie when I was a kid. And it's funny because this movie is often held up as one of the scariest movies. And knowing kind of when it came out, I think it was considered like I just don't think anyone had seen a movie like this in
Yeah.
1973. So respect to it for the scares it generates in the film, and it is of a time. But I saw this as a kid with my older stepbrother Michael, and we had a blast. We thought it was very, very funny because I would have been like Reagan's age when I saw this movie,
Okay.
maybe.
Sure.
And so I think from that age, I immediately saw it for what it was like, oh yeah, that's just what we go through when we're kids. So we start being awkward and rude and cussing and um being real tuned into sex, and this
Fucking
movie just
masturbating with a crucifix.
a constant, like what kid didn't?
What? Who didn't? Who didn't go through an exploratory phase like that?
But you're right, this movie like exaggerates that, of course, right? Like, uh we're clearly not masturbating with a crucifix or shouting the specific phrases, your mother sucks cocks in hell or whatever. But maybe we are, who knows?
Unless somebody cuts you off in traffic.
For real though. But it's such a beautifully done movie. It's so sharply done. It's so the special effects in it for its time are pretty incredible,
Oh
and
yeah.
it still gets me. I mean, it still has scenes that I'm like, that fucking freaks me out. And more than anything, the medical scenes, not the
Oh yeah.
exorcism
Oh, they're the
scenes.
worst.
Oof.
Yeah. So wait, why did you have to break this movie up over a few days? You
It
just
got me
got
tired.
tired. You're just like,
Yeah,
I can't right now.
yeah. I started it on Saturday night because I had nothing going on. I was like, let's just go ahead and watch this movie. And it's Saturday night. And I got
Yeah.
about an hour or so in it. I was like, I'm tired now. I would like to watch something else.
I admit I was in a hotel room last year and The Exorcist was on television on like network, not like like some
Hmm.
network. And I gotta say, when they break up The Exorcist to put commercials into it, it is the most boring slog of a
Hmm.
movie. And then last night when I watched this movie, kind of all in one, no commercials, it's so tight. Like it's one of those things that like if you put any sort of air into it, or if you like, kind of take the kettle off the boil, it just falls flatter than a pancake.
Yeah.
But like when you watch it from start to finish, I don't know. I find this movie like such a testament to filmmaking, and its attention to detail. The sound of this movie is
Yeah.
unrelenting as long as you don't have, you know, 60-90 second ad breaks every 15
Right.
minutes.
Yeah. 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 That's what happened to me when I switched over to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which is on Tubi right now. So it was very
Oh,
funny just to like, oh, okay, well, we're gonna get an ad for Weeble now or whatever. So
yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
great. Yeah, this is I think for me coming at it, so I'll just stating it here as we go into this movie. I think for me it's just that my rejection of the premise of this like I think because I've seen it so many times and played out,
Sure.
and when we talk about like that 1970s emergence of the Satanic Panic
Yeah.
that we started having, I think I just have an instant eye roll at it that's hard for me to curb. And so, as you said, like if you put any air into this movie, it can take all of the steam out of it. And I think of it like I thought my bicycle chain had linked up with the teeth of the gears, and I
Uh-huh.
started pedaling, and it didn't connect, and so I had to get off the bike and redo it, and then I just never could get the gears to fully connect. So I just kind of stumbled on a broken bike down the street.
Have you ever read the book?
I have not. I have not. I've read about William Peter Blatty, and Sarah Marshall had a writer named Marlena Williams on her show last year, year before, some point in time that kind of talked about The Exorcist and the book that it was based off of. How about you?
I did. I read the book when I was like a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think I read the book before I even saw the movie
Interesting.
because for whatever reason, whatever parental decision that went on in my household, My parents were like, no, the movie is too scary, but my library card went unchecked. And I read the book and they were like, you're reading The Exorcist? And I was like, yeah, it's really scary. And like what got me about the book was that it was so much more about like corruption and like crazy stuff going on in the Catholic Church. And it was
Interesting.
like, I kind of knew the story of The Exorcist because it had been out for, a decade or so, had been lampooned by Saturday Night Live. Like it was
Uh-huh.
kind of in the cultural ethos. But like it was all the little side stories in the book that really were kind of terrifying to me because I didn't grow up in any kind of church, especially not the Catholic Church. And so this idea of like peeling back the lid off of all these like black masses and a priest and a nun and a dildo walk into a hotel room and like all these sort of horrible stories of like the Catholic Church gone awry that they've been trying to cover up. That to me was
Mm.
almost more shocking than this spooky boopy the
Uh-huh.
devil's out to get some poor kid. It was more the like real stories from the Catholic Church that I was like, oh my God, what is going on in this religion?
That sounds very interesting, actually. Yeah, this d- Friedkin in making this movie really wanted to just focus down on the the priests at hand here, and it is a
Yeah,
battle of good, the Catholic Church,
yeah,
versus evil, Satan.
yeah.
And
Or
it,
Pazuzu
or
or
Pazuzu,
whatever it's
right?
called.
Yeah. And it just wanted to focus down on good overcoming evil. It was very funny. I learned from the writer Marlena Williams, who said that, the Catholic Church has their own movie rating system.
Oh, sure.
And when this movie came out, well, for instance, one of the hardest rating you can get from the Catholic Church is condemned.
Oh,
And so,
yikes.
um, meaning like you're not allowed to watch this movie or
Yeah.
whatever. Like this is a horrible movie, for your mortal soul. And they did not condemn The Exorcist. They actually said, with reservations
Mhm.
about its graphicness, about, the depiction of the heresies in this movie,
Yeah,
etc.
yeah, yeah.
But because in the end
The church is the good guy.
the church is the good guy, and the our character who has a crisis of faith, his crisis of faith isn't shown in him doing bad things. His crisis of faith is shown in the kind of just a very common struggle that you would say of
Yeah.
like, you blame yourself for your mother's death,
Yep.
and so you but he never says like, why would God take
Oh,
my
yeah.
mother?
No,
He's
no.
having a crisis of faith of self, which I think is the kind of crisis of faith that I think the Catholic Church can most easily deal with, not the crisis of say a cover up of horrible abuses.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Yeah, I mean, Father Caris definitely he goes through it. Like even from the minute we meet him, he's like, "Look, I got it. I gotta stop being the priest's priest or the
Uh-huh.
priest's psychologist because these people are going through some shit that I can't listen to their bullshit too
Yeah.
much more here in Georgetown."
Here in
Also,
Georgetown.
my mom is literally dying up in New York City. I got to get like, and I am broke,
Uh-huh.
so I mean, it's like it's rough. This movie has so much going on.
You can see how it influenced The Omen,
Sure.
and also you can see how it influenced Rocky. Like I'd
Yeah.
forgotten about Father Karras being a boxer and all of his
Yeah.
like jogging and training, and was like, all right, well, good for you. You're looking good, dude. So this movie opens in northern Iraq. We've got an archaeological dig of the ruins of Hatra,
Hmm.
and this is led by priest Father Lancaster Marin,
Yeah.
Max von Sydow.
Now, what's crazy to me? Do you know how old Max von Sydow was when he made this movie? Do you want
He
to take a guess?
looks okay, 74.
He was 44 when he made this movie.
What?
Yeah. 44. Like his old age makeup took so long, like took hours. Like his old age makeup probably took as long as Linda Blair's makeup to become a demon. I
Okay,
was shocked when I read that fact.
honestly, that blows my mind because that I didn't think for 1 second that he was aged up in this movie. And so I laughed really hard when you said that because I thought, oh, that poor man looks rough. But yeah, I mean, kudos to the makeup team. He
Well,
looks
it's makeup team. It's also his acting. Like
yeah.
he, like from the minute you meet Father Marin, you see a man who is tired,
Uh-huh.
tired, much beloved by his colleagues, much respected, but this dude is exhausted
Mm-hmm.
in every scene.
Yeah. Well, and he does a lot, right? Like he's somewhat of a star of the Catholic Church
Yeah.
and that he's
Yeah.
called upon. He has done an exorcism before. We learned later, like
Yes.
10 or 12 years ago in Africa, that took, they said,
Months.
months to complete.
Oh my God.
Um, he is at one point later in this film when they call on him to come to Georgetown, he's in Woodstock, New York at
Mhm.
uh, some monastery, like working on
Yeah.
a book, like just writer's retreat. Like I need some
Yeah. Yeah.
quiet
Yeah.
time. But yeah, he's writing books. He is doing archaeological digs, looking for artifacts. And here in northern Iraq, he finds a stone talisman.
Mhm.
It is the face of Pazuzu,
Yeah.
basically. And the moment he sees it and finds, oh, and there's also
Like a St. Christopher's
St.
medal or
Joseph's.
St. Joseph's
I
medal?
think
I don't
it's
know.
St. Joseph's medallion, uh, little silver medallion. So this shit has him shook because he immediately is like, I need to have a 3 whiskey lunch at the
Yeah.
cafe.
I think that's tea. That's not whiskey.
I know,
I think
but
that's,
it's
yeah,
served in
no.
like a shot glass, and so
Yes.
I
Like
immediately
little
thought it
shot
was,
glass of tea.
yeah. Um,
The thing that kills me about the introduction to this movie is that is again, and I'm going to go back to the sound. I'm going to talk about the sound a lot
please.
in this because that was like my big takeaway for this watch is like the sound is unrelenting in this bit.
Hmm.
It's like the sound of hammers, digging, a cacophony of street noise. He almost gets run over by a horse and buggy with what appears to be um, Father Caris's mother or
Oh,
some. I mean, I don't
yeah,
think it's the same woman, but it looks very similar to
interesting.
like the sort of Mother Caris that appeared later. But it's like the sound is kind of unreal. Even when he's in the very quiet thing where like there's a constant tick tock of a clock that just inexplicably stops
Yes,
whenever he, just not really spooky, just sort of uncanny. And it's also this sense of like unfamiliar to a Western audience. Like everything is, everything is dusty and hot and like just seems like abrasive.
yeah,
And so by the time we get to nice, cozy, upper class Georgetown, we're like, oh, thank God. Oh, yeah, oh, look, there's like a goldfish bowl over there. There's like clothes and, it feels very comforting. So it's really interesting the idea of, we have to be lulled into this sense of comfort before like the creepy shit starts happening.
hmm.
And that actually starts with something that is not alien, but certainly very foreign.
There's a yeah, at the end of his time, or at the end of this opening in Iraq, that he is out walking and he goes up to the top of this hill, the
Yeah.
ruins, what have you,
Yeah.
but he sees the vision up there, and it is the full statue of Pazuzu standing up there with complete with giant erection wrapped in snakes.
Yeah.
Which is good times.
Hot.
I did like there's a there's a cut in this scene when he gets to the top of these ruins and confronts the statue and like stares in terror and awe at it, of like it just cuts to a shot of just like stray dogs fighting
Yeah.
in the desert.
Yeah.
It's got a couple of little beats like that. Like there's the famous face during Father Karras's dream of his mother on the New York
Uh-huh.
subway, of just like creepy face flashing
Yeah. Yeah.
suddenly. So let's go to Georgetown, present day,
Yeah.
1973.
Yeah. Fuck that old time religion. Let's get to
Yeah.
modern days.
And let's set up just how sweet and nice life is between Mother Chris, played by Ellen Burstyn,
Oh my God.
and
Ellen Burstyn.
yeah.
Fucking hell. Like, you want to talk about like an actor's actor.
Hmm.
Like, she goes through it in this movie.
Boy, she really does. I had read that in casting this movie, she made a really strong plea to Friedkin because of her Catholic upbringing,
Oh,
Ellen
really?
Burstyn, that was kind of what tipped him over the edge. But also, I think they had a lot of trouble putting the cast and the even the director together for this film.
Yeah, I
One of
could see
the
that.
one of the people they had asked was Mike Nichols to direct this movie,
Oh, interesting.
and it's so fascinating to think of. It's sort of like George Lucas asking David Lynch to direct Return of the Jedi. And you
Yeah,
think,
yeah,
what
yeah, yeah.
if? What would
Which,
Return of
yeah,
the Jedi
what would this
directed
have
by
been?
David Lynch? How would our lives be different? Same with Mike Nichols directing The Exorcist. And the reason Nichols turned them down, legitimate reason, is that he did not want to hinge his whole movie on a child actor.
Oh, yeah, that
He
makes
just was
sense.
like, that's not my bag, man.
Yeah.
I can't
I mean,
do that.
in the great halls of child actors on screen, like Linda Blair kind of set the tone. Like she was nominated for an Academy Award for this,
Uh-huh.
which was then kind of tainted because they didn't like release the fact that she didn't do all the voices for it. That the demon voice was actually like another actor, but
Hmm.
they had kind of like sent out the nominations and we're kind of like, okay, well, we're not going to give it to her anyway, but we can't really take back the nomination.
Right.
But like, I was really thinking about like Linda Blair and the idea of like you make a movie or you do a project or an art, you make an art that kind of hits the cultural zeitgeist so hard that you are then forever entwined with that character or that movie for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
And how some people kind of, like Ellen Burstyn, let's say, is part of this movie, but also had done other things and went on to do other things. But then Linda Blair, because she was so young, and I think we got to see young Reagan being so nice and normal and, begging her mom for a pony, making weird orange sculpture birds, and so normal. And like the journey she goes on is so shocking that I think people could not handle it. And they
Yeah.
couldn't separate the character from the actor
Yeah.
for like for the rest of Linda Blair's career.
Yeah, it's really hard to come down from that like debut performance as a
Yeah.
single type of thing. And to go from there, it's a real mud pit to get out of that.
Yeah.
But one of the ways that she is the perfect child actor beyond her skills of I mean, she really sells this character. I mean, she
Sure.
sells Reagan so well,
She's
but
so sweet. She
she's
is so
so
sweet.
sweet and then so vile when
Yeah.
Pazuzu gets hold of her. But the other thing is that like noting some of the behind the scenes stuff because this was wrong then, wrong now, scandals noted, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But like this was a bad set to work on by
Yeah.
I mean, I think by then standards too,
Yeah.
but it was dangerous. Ellen
Yeah.
Burstyn got injured doing
Yeah.
this. Very and so did Linda Blair got injured doing this set because they were doing the classic thing of like, well, we'll get better acting out of this child if I just shake this bed more. And it was
If we push them to extremes, if we like
yeah,
drop the temperature in this room to
yeah,
15 degrees. Yeah.
yeah. The Marlena Williams, the writer I referenced earlier, has written a book about The Exorcist, and she had talked about the I don't have his name in front of me, but basically the person the special effects
Okay.
supervisor for this movie when he was shaking the bed, early on when the bed is shaking up and down
Yeah.
and Linda Blair is shouting, make it stop, make it stop. Well, Linda Blair has said, I legitimately was telling the guy to stop shaking the bed because it hurt
Wow.
so much.
Wow.
And he had said in another interview, he said, uh, I shake the bed and get this incredible performance out of her. So, like, when does acting really begin? And he's sort of like
Right?
taking credit. He was like, the
Yeah.
moment she says, make it stop, that's when I turned it up
Yeah.
to make her act better. And I'm like,
Yeah.
there are ways to get performances out of people that
Oh yeah. Well,
involve
the
abusing
guy who
them.
played Father Dyer, like at the
Uh-huh.
very end when he's giving kind of the last rites to, Caris at the bottom of the steps, like William freaking like slapped him in the face and said, "Your friend has just died." I want to see motherfucking tears out of your eyes. And that's why he's so like, at the like, sounds sus, to say
Yes.
the least.
But to Linda Blair's credit, had Mike Nichols directed this movie,
Oh my
he would
God.
not have run into issues with a child actor
Yeah, yeah,
that we
yeah.
had ever had before. And to your point, I do think she was the bar set for
Yeah,
great child acting
yeah,
performances and great child acting behavior because, you know, not that it benefited her necessarily, but it benefited the production crew that she towed the line. She
yeah,
did what was asked of her and she did it really, really well.
yeah.
But there's a can we there's so much sidetracking. I don't want this episode to go over long, but Ellen Burstyn's character Chris is an actress, so she is
Yes.
on location in Georgetown shooting a movie. And if I, of course, forgot about this because I haven't seen this movie in almost 20 years, but it's so applicable to today because the movie she's shooting is about campus protests,
Hmm.
and she plays a centrist middling professor who like
Yeah.
breaks up the protests of these kids. I would presume it's about the Vietnam protests or something, or
Maybe,
Nixon
probably. Yeah.
protests or something. But she's saying, you know, well, you can't fight the system like this. You have to fight the system within the system,
Uh-huh.
which is such the most like New York Times, New York Post op-ed page type of behavior to
Just
have.
like, come on, what about the rights of the people that, the students that want an education? You're fucking their education up with your protests.
And she even in as Chris, not as the character she plays in the movie within the movie, but even as Chris, she describes the movie she's in as the Walt Disney version of the Ho Chi Minh story.
I love it.
So even she is like this like virulent anti-communist sort of person, which is I think the most like centrist boomer thing you can be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like this beginning is so, and again, like what makes this movie so good is the the Georgetown act, the sort of life is normal in
Uh-huh.
Georgetown is so rich,
Yeah.
so lived in, and so multifaceted that, listen, ghosts and demons and goblins are like the last thing on these people's minds. Like
Yeah.
they have adult worries and concerns
Yeah.
that are very normal and relatable. Like Reagan's dad, MIA, he's over in, Europe, doesn't call his daughter on her birthday, and Ellen Burstyn is pissed. Like they're, shooting with the movie, juggling personalities between the director and some other guy who he thinks is a Nazi. Like it's really interesting to me, like how rich their lives are and how much life they kind of put into the beginning of this.
Hmm.
So by the time the demon shows up, you get a sense of just how much they've had to put on hold just to deal with this fucking wacky, crazy supernatural shit.
Yeah. I found the whole uh, this Georgetown life is peaceful scene sort of thing kind of interesting because with the satanic panic group of films, like especially demonic possession, Jesus versus Satan type of storylines in horror movies, it does always, to me, I always read it as this isn't really what's happening. There's something else going on that
Mm-hmm.
this is a cover up for, which is what horror movies do. Like we create a
Sure.
monster that means something else. But Chris's inability to sort of like empathize with the student characters in the film, I found really interesting.
Sure.
Also, the fact that almost anytime she's interacting with anyone, she has always turned her Karen dial up to 10.
Oh yeah.
Like when she's talking to the operator because she's
Yeah.
mad that
I
her
I
husband
clocked
is
that as well.
unavailable,
I've been on the line for 20 goddamn minutes. Call the hotel again.
and it but to me it speaks to someone who is actually not at all in touch with her child. Like she likes the cuteness of her daughter.
Yeah.
Like, "Oh, mommy, I want a horse.
Mhm.
Mommy, please, could I get a pony?" And it's so sweet and you like the daughter when she behaves in line with what you think your daughter is supposed to be. But the moment anything veers off. Like, she's of course worried for the health of her daughter. I don't mean to say that she doesn't care about her daughter. That's not what I'm after. But I think the inability to fully connect with the fact that she's a different person,
Mm,
and
yeah.
especially at this age, you're about to enter the time. And to me, the Pazuzu storyline in this horror movie is the writers and the creators essentially saying, I think unintentionally, we don't know what to do with a girl turning into an autonomous human being, adult.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that to me is really, really scary. And Chris, from the writers putting it out, is incapable, I think, of general empathy of anything beyond her own experience. Anyways, that was my Karen read on Chris.
Okay.
That was kind of
Yeah.
how I was here. But yes, she's adorable. She's so cute. There's a moment also where we learn that Regan has found a Ouija board in the closet.
Put that there. How did that get there?
Oh, sure. And she's been talking to someone named Captain Howdy,
Uh-huh.
and she's been doing the Ouija board on its own, which we are told you should never do.
That's not a good idea.
No. But Captain Howdy doesn't really answer her questions when she's in front of mom.
But it makes it very clear that Captain Howdy does not want to talk to Mother.
Mm-mm. No, we do see a moment when she puts the planchette down on the board and it moves on its own.
Like away from Chris's
Away,
hands.
away from Chris.
And she's
Yes.
like, why'd you
Yes.
do that? And she's like, wasn't me. It was Captain Howdy. I don't know. Sorry.
Okay. So there's the director of the film within the film. It's a man named Burke Dennings, who is the
Dudley
most
Moore. He's like
so Dudley Moore.
like
Yes.
the most Dudley Moore you can get without actually getting Dudley Moore.
He's a drunk.
He's a British
He's a
drunk.
he's a boh he's like a bohemian spirited director
Yeah.
type of
Yeah.
person. There's a great scene when he's drunk at Chris's house party and he's yelling at her. Like, it's a horrible scene, but he's yelling at her. She has a servant whose name
Is that her
is,
servant that that he's going
it's like
after
her
for being?
driver. She has like a
Yeah.
maid and
Yeah.
like a house attendant
Yeah.
guy.
Okay.
And it's the house attendant guy who's Swiss. He says that he's
Okay.
Swiss, but again, like, we're talking about a 50-ish Swiss guy in
Mm-hmm.
1973.
Yeah.
So we're of military age in 1943,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
And while the Swiss were certainly quote unquote neutral during World War II, uh, there's not really a neutrality to housing Nazi artwork or
Mm-hmm. Or
Nazi
gold
prisoners of
or
war,
yeah.
or not
Yeah.
prisoners of war, war criminals or what have
Yeah.
you. But yeah, he hounds this man relentlessly for being a Nazi. Um, it's a
Yikes.
it's an intense scene.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Caris, Damien Caris, who is he's our main priest. Like, right?
But he's not the titular exorcist,
He
though.
is not the exorcist. That's gonna
He is
be
just
Lancaster.
an exorcist.
Yes. Um, but yeah, that he is yeah, he's kind of, he looks like he's from the streets of Baltimore, from the streets of
Yeah.
New York City. Like, he's a
Of
very
Brooklyn. Like
working
he is
class
a
Brooklyn
yeah.
guy. Yeah. Um, yeah, he is probably a first generation American son of a Greek mother, Italian mother,
I think Italian.
Italian. Um, and so he's got yeah, he's really beholden to his mother, who is old and infirm. He is a boxer. He works with his hands. He looks gritty and tough, and
Yeah.
he is what's the word? Broody as
Yeah.
a general appearance.
Oh, for sure.
Jumping ahead, hold on 2 seconds here. He also has a very intense drinking problem.
A bit. Maybe a bit.
Maybe a bit. Maybe we don't call it a problem, but he does turn to booze to deal with his things, which I
Yeah.
think technically is a problem when you're like booze is a is a supplement
I
for
mean, we also meet him when he's going through like one of the worst periods of his life, I
yes.
feel.
Yeah, he really is in a
He's over
really
his
bad
job.
shape. Hmm.
His mother is, like he can't afford to put his mother into a home. She doesn't want to go into a home, but he doesn't live close enough to her that he can take care of her anymore. And especially after like, some of these scenes are rough because coming from the like upper class, wealthy home in Georgetown to kind of going to what the 70s looked like for I think a lot more people in America. Like you realize just how gritty the 70s
Uh-huh.
were economically.
Yeah. And he's basically he is a priest, but he's also essentially the church psychiatrist. Like he
Yeah.
goes to different parishes and talks and like helps priests through their problems. And he's tired of it. It's really tough. And the family has put so much pressure on him, the child that of this woman,
Yeah.
to be her sole caretaker.
Yeah.
In fact, pretty soon we meet his uncle.
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, what are you doing other than yelling at
Right.
fucking me for
Yeah.
not taking like I don't know. Why don't you fucking help out? Like you're yelling at me for not having a higher paying job
Yeah.
is not helping the situation. But yeah, that's the pressure he's under. It's these like really intense family situations where you as the I'm guessing only child of this woman is left in charge. And of course, like that's cracking the foundation of his faith in the church.
Yeah.
And he even has a meeting with who is it, Father Tom, asking for reassignment to try and get out of the job. And Father Tom is like, no, actually, you can't leave because you're the only one who's really good at this.
You're too good to be transferred.
It's very Peter principle, right? Like we can't actually promote you because you're too good at this one job.
Yeah.
So Caris is dealing with his mother's sickness. And she asks him at one point in time, why you do this to me, Demi? Why,
Hmm.
why you do this to me? Like, why do you abandon me? Why do you leave me
Yeah.
here? Why do you whatever? And so all of that guilt he puts into punching a heavy bag at the gym.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the night of the party. Chris hosts a party at her Georgetown home. This is where Burke's Denning is like harassing her Swiss butler guy.
Hmm.
Um, and there's also there's a moment where Chris sees Father Dyer, who is Damien Caris's friend in the priesthood, and kind of learns a little bit about him, who he is. Eventually, Burke Dennings leaves because he's so drunk. They like
Yeah.
get him out. Like, we got you an Uber,
Yeah. Yeah.
like go away.
Please stop assaulting the staff.
Uh,
Go to bed. Go
and
directly to bed.
there's a moment wherein she she's gone upstairs, or I'm sorry, Reagan has been put to bed. She's
Oh
gone
yeah.
to
No,
bed.
this is adult time for
This is
sure.
adult time. I love adult time in 1973 which is Father Dyer sitting at the piano. We're all gathered around. Like this is of an old time.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
this like by 1983 no one's doing this, right? Like no adults are doing this for a party, right? Like there's
I
something
mean, unless they're
about
musical theater adults.
that's right. Well, and Father Dyer, a true theater kid, being like,
Yeah.
my idea of heaven is an all white nightclub with me as the headliner, and they love me for all eternity.
Son, you gay. You gay.
God bless him, though. Good for him. I hope heaven is that.
Yeah. Sounds great.
But while they're all singing old standards, tie a yellow ribbon, whatever they're singing, Regan comes down in her nightgown, stands before them, and says one of the guys in the group is a NASA astronaut. By the way, we learned that earlier. And she turns to him and she says, "You're going to die up there." And then just green liquid pours out of between her legs onto the floor.
I never got that before, that it's to the astronaut.
Yeah.
I always thought she was Like it doesn't make any sense because in my mind, I didn't get that. I always thought she was referencing Burke Dennings, who
Mm.
is going to die up in her room, but he's left the
Oh,
party. So
but
that
yeah,
makes
he's already
no sense
gone.
at all.
Yeah.
Like that connection was never made by me. So
Yeah.
thank you for clearing that up. As many times as I've seen this movie, I've never gotten that before.
I know this because my first break of turning off the movie for another night was right when we were meeting the astronaut. And I'm like, is this guy an
Okay,
astronaut? Oh, he is an astronaut. You know what? Let's take a break.
I gotta go. I
So
gotta
it
go
really
make a
stuck with
Pop
me that
Tart.
there's an astronaut in the group.
Okay,
All
okay,
right. So she pees the green liquid,
yeah.
and then it says this horrible thing to a party guest. And everyone was a little bit like, whoa, wow, oh,
Uh,
teen girls, what are you going to do, man?
yeah,
And mom takes her back upstairs, and we're just kind of at the point of Reagan being like, Mom, what's wrong with me? And
yeah,
she's like, I don't know,
yeah.
take your pills. It's just your nerves. You'll be fine. Um, and then the maid has to like clean up all the green pea
Hmm.
soup that hit the floor. But as we're trying to like get the party going again, we hear Reagan scream upstairs. And when Chris goes up there, like that's when the bed is shaking
Yeah.
like crazy.
Because that's the like, and that to me is kind of a marking point in this difference between preteen girl acting crazy or acting unusual or acting not like normal into spooky shit's happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like things outside of that girl's control. And I know the doctors are later going to be like, well, when the brain has a little fuck up, you can have seizures that make it seem like, Chris is going to be like, no, no, the entire bed was moving. I was on the bed.
Hmm.
It wasn't my daughter moving the bed, it was the bed. Now we're fully into like supernatural territory here.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea of the one of the subtle horrors in horror movies and in almost any movie that is going to deal with a medical issue is that if you're a woman or especially a black woman or a gay man, like having a doctor being like, yeah, I don't, no, it's not that. No,
It's
surely.
no, no.
No, 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 of course not. And that's what Chris is having to deal with, even though she literally saw the bed shaking and
Yeah.
she's got to go through several iterations of these doctors saying like, oh, we think it's a lesion in this temporal lobe
Yeah.
that's what I mean, definitely lesions on the brain cause spasms. And she's like, it was not a spasm, the whole bed was shaking. And the doctor says, listen, the problem is not her bed, it's her spasms.
Hmm.
Like, you literally just took what I said and
Yeah.
erased it entirely.
Yeah. Yeah, some of these like it's the medical sequences, I think, especially when I first watched this movie, like the very first time, were some of the most abrasive to me. Some of the
Hmm.
again back to this idea of sound, as abrasive as the beginning parts. It was also like I don't think my concept of what medicine was in the 70s, like by the time we watched this, what is it? They're doing like a spinal tap?
Yeah.
That looks horrifying.
Yeah.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
But everything is loud, uncomfortable. Just looks like the look on Reagan's face when she's going through these medical procedures, even though we know she is halfway possessed, sort of possessed.
Hmm.
You like the humanity really comes out in that she is not liking all the thing. Like it hurts, it's scary, it's not a pleasant experience for
Yeah.
her or for her mother to watch.
Yeah. I mean, they have a moment where they put like this tube into essentially
Like her
their
vein in her neck.
jugular vein or
Yeah.
whatever, and it is, and then they have to plug it to like run the blood out. But before they get it plugged in, like blood is just squirting out of this tube in her neck. It's disturbing as shit. Like
Yeah.
medical trauma is real in this movie, and I think
Yeah.
it's the most unnerving for me personally. It was like the most disturbing part. At home, like her spasms keep getting worse. The doctors are being brought in, you know, a
They
house
don't,
call or
sure enough, they
whatever.
don't find anything in the brain. Look,
No.
these very loud x-rays, the
Yes.
loudest x-ray machine you've ever heard.
Yeah.
Nope, no lesions. So you know what? We didn't see anything the first time, but I think we should go back and do this entire painful process again just to make sure.
And at home, like the doctor sees her literally like flipping back and forth
Yeah.
in her bed. I'm like, sir, these are not spasms.
Yeah.
There is something else. And at one point in time, she punches the shit out of this doctor, sending
Yeah.
him flying, and screams at him, "Keep away, the sow is mine." I think
Uh-huh.
talking about Chris, right? Or
No,
is
I
it the
think he's talking
demon
about
talking about
Reagan.
taking about
He's talking
Reagan?
about
Okay.
Reagan.
Yeah. Uh we also get I think is around this point in the film too when we have Chris comes in and sees her like and it's not even masturbating with a
She's
crucifix.
like
It is
stabbing herself.
stabbing her genitals.
Yeah.
There is blood and there is the sound of like it really does sound like somebody like hammering a watermelon, like putting a
Yeah.
hammer into a watermelon.
Yeah.
Like it's upsetting.
And she like Reagan like grabs her mother's face and like pushes it into the blood.
Yeah.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
And also like giant chest of drawers moving by themselves. The door slams shut
Yes.
so that way the personal assistant and the butler can't get in. Like we talk a lot about on this show about sort of the when you're in a supernatural situation and you are grasping for any sort of rational explanation other than a supernatural explanation, this is the point where you're like, listen, there's a
Yeah.
lot going on here that
Uh-huh.
I don't think modern psychiatry or doctory is going to fix.
Yeah.
But what makes this movie so, I think, affecting to people is that Chris has to try. She has the resources. She is a affluent, woman. She
Hmm.
has the money to try every single resource that a logical, quote, logical, sane person would try. So she has to follow them all to their end in order to get to the old time religion
Yeah.
exorcist thing.
Yeah, and these doctors go from let's do all these horrible, horrible tests to finally, they're even asking her after seeing all of the stuff you just
Yeah.
described happen. They're still saying, "Well, these tests are still negative. Do you keep drugs around your house that maybe she's
Right.
getting into?" And she's like, "No." And they
Yeah.
say, maybe even though it's not a real science, maybe we should look into psychiatry.
Yeah, I know, right?
Like they're kind of implying, like, not really a science, more of
It's
a
yeah, it's
it's
all
like
right.
a tarot reader is kind of the
Yeah.
same thing. Like they're kind of treating it
We
like
get our
that. But
charts read. What time were you born?
yeah, but to be fair to them, the psychiatrists she gets initially, they're not Father Caris. They are
No.
psychiatrists, and they are as useless as a newspaper horoscope in treating this child.
Oh my God. This hypnotism scene, I think, is like one of the scariest scenes in the movie
Hmm.
because it's so quiet. It's like, and we've seen, like Reagan is now like, Pazuzu is out of control, like
Hmm.
she is fully possessed. And what's creepy is like how still and calm Reagan is while under hypnotism. And it's kind of like the last glimpse we get of Reagan before Reagan completely goes under.
Hmm.
And we don't see her again, except when she claws help me into her own skin from inside her body. But this hypnotism scene, like it's something about the quietness of it.
Yeah.
We see her just quietly answering questions, and we understand, oh, this is the last time we're going to see Reagan.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can the movie sort of denotes that with the eyes. Like once the
Mhm.
eyes go fully like bright green,
Yeah.
because we'll see it with Father Karras at the end, right? Like when Pazuzu is inside of you, it is
Yeah.
denoted by the eyes. I During this hypnotism scene, the psychiatrist is saying like, "I'm speaking to the person inside Reagan right now. Come forward, answer me," and she makes this horrible noise, and then you see a wide shot of the room, and both Chris and the doctor step back holding their
I
faces,
know,
and I'm like,
right?
"Oh, she just diarrheaed herself. Like she
Yeah.
created the most foul smell in the
Yeah.
world," which I think is in the. I think I remember from reading about it that that's in the book that he focuses a little bit on the bodily fluids and the shit that he's doing
Yeah.
to her,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
demon is doing
Yeah.
to her body, and that there's some real poo things happening, which,
Oh,
yeah, which,
I thought it was her breath. No,
it
because
could
she
be the
goes like,
breath too. Yeah.
like she makes that sort of like monster morning breath
That's probably what they're
that
doing in the
literally
film.
backs her mom away.
But the end of this scene, as he gets too close to her, and Reagan growls, grabs his nuts, and attacks him. Like, looks
Yeah,
like she's about to
jumps up.
devour him.
Yeah. And I'm like,
Now
well,
let's meet.
let's get her committed.
Yes, because now we're gonna get to the point now where she's gonna be tied to a bed from here on out,
Yeah.
I believe. So let's meet William F. Kinderman, homicide.
Oh yeah. Let's get into the third arm of this movie. Okay, so we've got the caring mother.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the doubtful priest.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got the lovable schlubby police detective.
Mm-hmm. I like his character a lot. I
Yeah.
liked him when he was on screen. I like what he's doing as an actor. I like this character. Again, like it's a little bit like I don't know how necessary it is to have the homicide detective in this movie, but it
Well, there's
does
a murder or there's a
sure
mysterious death.
totally,
And
totally.
I know that this is a big thing about like the book versus the movie. The book is like kind of focuses more on the detective side of
Mm-hmm.
things, of like the inexplicability of there's a crime,
Mm-hmm.
which we haven't have we got to? I think the crime has happened by this point.
We just learned at the end of that party, actually, uh that Burks had died. He had fallen
Yes.
down the steps, the famous Georgetown steps, and he was so drunk, like of course, like that. Just what a tragedy. But Dennings has a different thing because he tracks down Father Caris and starts with him about like, hey, there's something weird about that murder, like
Yeah.
that's a
There's a
little
weird
strange
murder.
because
There's also
it wasn't I think it's a murder, and I want to know what you know about witchcraft
Mhm.
first. But ultimately, I think Detective Kinderman is actually trying to get into Caris, knowing that Caris is a psychiatrist of priests. And what
Yes.
he thinks is maybe the priests had something against him or
Yeah.
whoever.
Well, and there's also this sort of church desecration,
Mm-hmm.
completely unrelated.
Right. Yeah, there was a Virgin Mary statue where they painted tits and a dick on it,
Hmm.
basically. So yeah, he's like, I think maybe there's some kind of sickness within the priests. Maybe you can
Yeah.
tell me if you've talked to any of the priests in your sessions
Yeah.
that they seem kind of like crazy. And
Hmm.
to Father Karras's credit, he's like, no, like absolutely,
Yeah.
I'm a psychiatrist. I would never do that.
Yeah.
And
But just
Kinderman
so you know,
says, yeah,
just,
Kinderman is like, yeah, there's this funny story about a psychiatrist, even in old, like, hippy dippy liberal California, that actually went to jail for not talking to the police. I'm just telling you that's a story that happened. I'm not
I love
threatening
it.
anything.
Soft touch.
Hmm.
Lieutenant Kinderman. It's just soft touch.
But yeah, the whole thing was at the bottom of those steps near Chris's apartment. He said, Burke's head was turned completely around, like it was 180'd.
Yeah.
And from all accounts, that happened before the fall.
Yeah.
Okay. So the doctors, the actual doctors are like, maybe somnambulous distortion. It's only seen really in primitive cultures. You know what? Maybe honestly, why not fucking try an exorcism?
Yeah.
It's a placebo effect, but that can be really, it's helped before. Like exorcism, of course, is not real.
I mean, I love it
But
that she's sitting at like a table of 12 doctors.
this movie grossly, and maybe it was different in 1973, but this movie grossly distorts the American healthcare and law enforcement
Yeah.
communities of like, this is a relentless detective who's actually trying to solve a case. And this is a set of doctors who will band a whole army of them to try and figure out what's wrong with this one child.
Oh, yeah. Well, Kristen's got the money. She's a movie star.
That's true.
Like, and
Maybe it
I
does
think
work if you have that much money. Yeah.
you got that much money, you can literally try and throw money at the problem.
Yeah. Um, Detective Kinderman in like investigating the steps does find like a little mud totem, like a little mud
Like a little
turtle, I
pig.
think. A little
I
pig.
think
Is
it's
that
like a
what
little
it is?
pig. Yeah.
Yeah. And at Chris's house, he sees like little clay, a little clay turtle and
Yeah.
giraffe or whatever. And he's like, "Oh, did your daughter do these?" She's
Hmm.
like, "Yeah, my daughter is a real artist."
This is one of the I think one of the most intense quiet scenes in this is between Lieutenant Kinderman and Chris,
Uh-huh.
because I think Chris had it's like from the second that police officer shows up at her door, she has put together that her daughter killed Burke Dennings.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
She
like the whole
knows.
thing is that like Burke was, like the personal assistant was out getting a medication and Burke was just like hanging out at the house.
Yeah.
Burke dies.
Uh-huh.
Chris comes home. And so there's this sort of unaccounted for time where they're like, oh, well, he must have left, was drunk, ran
Yeah.
into somebody, pushed him down the stairs. But now enough shit has gone down with Reagan that Chris is like, oh, absolutely, my demon possessed daughter did this.
Absolutely had to have killed him.
But
Like she,
it's that
yeah.
like she knows. And it's really, I mean, like watching again, like watching Ellen Burstyn play that line between, would you like another cup of coffee? Like, don't raise any red flags, be polite, keep it calm. But you can see on her face, she knows exactly why this police is here.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
knows her daughter's guilty.
Yeah. It's actually when he leaves the scene that she hears the shouting upstairs and she goes up there to find Reagan stabbing her crotch with a
Yeah.
crucifix. And this
Yeah.
was a crucifix, by the way, that a few scenes earlier, Chris had found under Reagan's pillow, being like,
Right.
"Who put a crucifix in my daughter's room?" And she
Yeah.
inquires with the help, with her sister who lives there or
Yeah.
visits there a lot, with anyone. Everyone's like, I'm not out here putting
I
crucifixes
know,
in
right?
anyone's room.
Who knows?
And that
Unexplained.
crucifix shows back up. And this is when we get the masturbation scene.
Yeah.
Um, it's also the first moment that we see Reagan's head turn fully backwards on her
Yes.
body.
Oh my God. So shocking.
Yeah. Also, a bit of overcussing because it says, "You know what she did, your cunting daughter." I'm like, cunting?
Hunting. Is that like a boating race?
Yeah, it is a little, it's a little bit
Is
overcussing.
that like punting?
Yeah, cunting. Okay, so she finally meets with Father Caris and asks him about getting an exorcism. And then we hear a little bit about the bureaucracy and history of exorcisms. He's like, one, if we did that, we'd have to go back to the time machine to the 16th century. Like, we don't do exorcisms
Yeah.
because since we've learned about things like schizophrenia, like, we don't
Right. Right.
feel the need to exorcise people anymore. And I'm like, aha,
Mm-hmm.
aha.
Mm-hmm.
But he says, he's like, yeah, and I would need church approval. I can't just go to your house and be like, do an exorcism. That's just not an online service we
You don't just
provide.
do an exorcism. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So he agrees to actually like help put together a case for an exorcism. So you kind of have to convince the church that this isn't schizophrenia or
Yeah.
something mild or
Or
what
a
have you.
hoax.
Or a hoax. Yeah.
Because I think that's, kind of if you look at it from the detective side of things, you've got a perfectly lovely, innocent teenage girl who is your only murder suspect,
Uh-huh.
who could be faking some sort of demonic possession in order to literally get away with murder.
Yeah. So now you have two different types of investigations, two people having to put together a case
Yeah.
to understand what happened and to try and get to fix whatever, justice for what happened, whatever they're looking for. So, like, the first thing that happens with Caris is he goes to talk to Reagan and she says, "I'm not Reagan, I'm the devil now." And then she also says, "By the way, Caris, your mother's in here with us. Would you like to leave a message?" So the devil immediately is like, "I know how to push your buttons,
Oh,
you
yeah. Oh,
weak-minded
for
man."
sure.
And he's like, "Oh, well, if you know, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, I feel like you're guessing at a thing. What's my
Yeah.
mother's maiden name?" And she just vomits slime all over him.
So gross. Literal split pea soup.
Yeah, yeah. It's just thick and green.
Yeah.
He, he tells Chris that they're he's still needing evidence, right? Like, because
Yeah.
it's things like she's speaking a language that she doesn't know. That sort of thing. Like, I need to see like an actual supernatural. I need to see her levitate or control a thing with
Yeah.
her mind or do a thing that would actually whatever. Um, Again, he does see this. He sees her open a drawer telepathically, and he's still
Mhm.
like, well, but he does get a recording of her speaking in a language that doesn't sound like English.
It also doesn't sound like one voice, which I think is horrifying.
Yes, which is true.
Like,
Um,
like not just that, but there's like 6 different voices in there.
he also he starts dousing her with quote unquote holy water, and she's screaming, "It burns, it burns." But later, he takes that tape of her speaking in another language to an audio to some podcasting friend of his who
Mhm.
runs it through Audacity in reverse. And he's like, she's not speaking like Latin or Aramaic or whatever. She's speaking English, but backwards. And he's like, oh, damn, that's not going to prove anything. I'm like, yes, it does.
And also, she does speak Latin and I think French to him. I
I
mean,
think
not
she
like
speaks Italian. She starts pretending she speaks
Italian.
in
Yeah.
mother's voice.
Yeah.
But he also says to Chris, that water was tap water.
Yeah.
To be holy water has to be blessed, and so this is
You've got a few
useless.
strikes against, but you
Uh-huh.
still have quite a lot of strikes for
Yeah.
exorcism.
Um, this was my second break from the movie. So, but yeah, it's like, oh, it's like I think this is enough to prove that she was speaking in reverse English.
Yeah.
Because as you know, Cecil, you recorded the intro
I
to this
did to this
podcast.
very podcast.
When you say random number generator horror podcast number 9 in reverse, you had to teach it to yourself in reverse,
Yeah.
then say it back in reverse so then you could play it forward to get the creepy sound.
It took all afternoon.
It's a big ordeal. So like I almost think like a child speaking in Latin who's especially if they're Catholic, you would have heard Latin phrases in
Yeah.
mass before.
Yeah.
But a child who can speak English in reverse perfectly when you backmask it, that's very impressive. That's not a skill you just have.
That is unusual.
Mm-hmm. Also, this is when the sister calls Chris's sister, whose name I've already forgotten. She's just kind of there for supplemental reasons. But Chris's sister calls Caris over one night. It's like, you have to see this, but I don't want
I don't
Chris
think
to
that's
see
her
it.
sister.
Oh, it's not
I
her
think
sister?
that's her like personal assistant.
Oh, the young woman that's there?
Yeah. Yeah. That's her
Oh.
personal assistant because at the very end, like after everything is said and done, she's like, I'm really going to miss you. Are you sure you don't want to come back to LA with me? And the girl's like, hell no.
Okay, so I had the
Love
similar
you.
confusion you
I
had
quit.
earlier. It was like, I don't know who is related and who is not here.
No,
Okay,
I think
so
that's like yeah, that's her. That's her.
there's three employees of the
Yes.
house. There's the
Yes.
younger woman who I thought was
Yeah.
her sister. There's the older woman who's the maid, and then there's the older man who's
It's like the driver,
the
handyman.
chauffeur,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. Okay, well, she doesn't want Chris to see it, but invites Karis over, and then we see one. It is ice cold. You can see their breath
Yeah.
in Reagan's bedroom, and we see the words "help me" like scarred onto her.
Yeah. Like
belly.
reverse scarred.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, fine. Let's do this exorcism thing.
That seems to be the tipping point for him to be able to go to the church, and they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, we can totally do an exorcism.
Do you want to do it?
Not you though.
I mean, like you can help, but
Well, that was
we really
that hit me in a weird place. Like, in a thing of like, I love your idea. This is so good. There's definitely a moment when like doing pitches to people, like
Uh-huh. They're like, what a
in
great
Hollywood.
idea if you didn't do that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of like,
Your
oh, I
idea.
love this. Yeah, this writing is great. I love these characters. This is really cool. So we clearly need to get a head writer, like a
Yeah.
showrunner type, to actually execute this. You're like,
Maybe someone with experience or
and
just anyone that's not you.
yeah, and totally fair enough. I have never
Yeah.
run a TV show before. I would be happy with a experienced showrunner if I ever got a TV show, but there is something where you feel a little the moment when somebody says, "Oh no, you're on the team. You're
Mhm.
not a starter. Did you think you were
No.
starting? No, no, no,
Yeah.
you're not starting." So they say we need to get Lancaster Marin. He's
Bring me an old priest and a young priest.
yeah. Yeah, let's bring him out of retirement. Let's get this guy here.
How's his health? How old is he? He's off doing digs in Iraq. Surely he's all right.
Yeah, and he's relaxing in Woodstock, New York at this point, like writing another book. And
Yeah.
so sure, bring him out. And Father Marin is very I'm too old for this shit, but he does
Oh,
it.
yeah.
He's in service to the church, and he shows up at Chris's house, and the very first thing we hear is the demon voice go, Marin.
I know, right? Eek.
I do love this moment with Marin and Caris because you see the professionalism of Marin.
Yeah.
And Marin is, Caris is saying, do you want some background? He's,
Yeah.
no, not really. He said, well, she has 3 distinct personalities. He's like, no, there's only one personality, and it is the devil. And you do not have conversations with the devil. You cannot bargain with the devil. You cannot talk with the devil. You do not converse with the devil. You
The
stay in
devil will
control of
lie to
what's
you.
happening.
He
Yeah.
will wrap up those lies with some truth as a psychological attack. Good luck. Good luck out there,
And
rookie.
Marin's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
because Caris makes the rookie mistake of listening to
Yeah.
the devil pretend to be his mother or say things about his
Yeah.
mother. And it's hitting him really hard because he doesn't know how to block that out.
Mhm.
But we see, because Karis doesn't know how to block that out. Marin, one of the first things Devil Child says to him is stick your cock up your ass, Marin. And Marin just goes, silence. I'm like, perfect.
Yeah. Great. Amazing.
And the line that I think gets quoted a lot and made fun of a lot of, and it's such a weird form of cussing. Like when I think back to your mother sucks cocks in hell, Karis. But actually, the line in context, now that I see this movie again, actually makes a ton of sense. It doesn't feel over cussing because he is telling him, your literal mother, who you love and feel
Yeah.
horrible about betraying, is in hell sucking people's dicks. Like,
Yeah.
that's a really cutting line, much more so than your cunting daughter, which still makes
Yes.
not quite much
I think
sense
also
to me.
your cunting daughter is in Burke Dennings' voice. So it's it's almost like
Oh,
once this demon kills or is in proximity of is kind of like is able to adopt these voices of people who
yeah.
have died or
Yeah.
people who are marginalized. Because there's also the can you spare a penny for an old altar boy, mister? This sort of people on the fringes of society that are kind of like
Yeah.
one foot in the grave.
Yep.
The devil's like, I got this.
You're right. That makes total sense because in that moment when she says your cunt, you know who did it, your cunting daughter, that would be Burke's telling
Yeah.
or Pazuzu using Burke's voice
Yeah.
being like, yeah, I fucking killed Burke's.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we go through a lot of this is
Round
like the
one. The
action.
exorcism. Ding ding.
Yeah. And okay.
The titular exorcism.
The bed rises, it shakes. There's a lot of just and
More green pea soup on the holy vestments or whatever you call that thing.
yeah, it's Marin reading from the Bible and Karis has to read response texts from the Bible. Karis is very clearly like so
Yeah, Caris
overwhelmed.
is
He's
yeah,
he's choking in these big moments.
yeah,
He looks scared. He looks super scared
yeah.
of the situation. Reagan's eyes go crazy. Green just oozes out of her as she like at one point like goes completely silent. And you're kind of like, oh, we won round 1
Yeah,
in the books,
Did we
maybe.
though?
But of course, Reagan lifts right back up and just laughing and laughing, shutters and curtains going crazy. Power of Christ compels you. Power of Christ compels you. Holy water, holy water. She floats back down to the bed. Oh, this is the levitation scene, which I have as my
Yes.
background, which is an incredible levitation scene.
Yeah.
I only have one note, which is it's very clearly two scenes laid upon each other. And so Caris and Marin are supposed to be looking right at her, but they didn't they factored in direction but not depth of field.
Yes.
So it's a very weird scene where I'm like, these men are, what are they looking at? Oh, they're supposed to be looking at her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We see the giant Pazuzu statue for a brief moment here, but Marin says, let's rest before we start again.
And he bounces.
He
leaving
bounces.
Caris alone,
Mm-hmm.
just to like, Caris is just wrecked, but also sitting on Reagan's bed, which I'm like, I think every time I watch this movie, I'm like, there is not enough money in the world to get me that physically close to this possessed girl.
No.
Even though she's catatonic in this state, you're just going to like chill on her bed? No, thank you.
Absolutely not. Yeah, it's really interesting because Caris is not really, he sees the horror, the supernatural horror happening in Reagan, but quite he never quite is over the horror of his mother's death.
Yeah.
Which I think actually is really interesting. I think that's really compelling that he actually doesn't fear this fucking thing. He fears what it's saying about his mother.
Yeah.
He fears that he forsook his mother.
Yeah, like Caris never seems like, he's not worried that the demon's going to like attack him.
Yeah.
It's all psychological attack.
Yeah. Which I appreciate in Father Karras because I think he's dealing with the real world drama in his own life, the real world horrors of his own life.
Well, and Father Marin is the inverse of that, which Father Marin is like tough as nails against the psychological attack, but the flesh is weak in his case. Like literally his body is failing, and that's the way the devil gets into Father Marin.
Yeah. So during this break, we talked
Father Marin's shaking on the toilet, taking a pill.
Oh yeah, he's got to take his heart pills.
He is clearly not doing all right.
No, there's a reason why that previous exorcism he did 10 or 12 years ago in Africa took a few months, that you can pace it out. Like, you don't have to do it all in one single day.
You don't have to do it all in one day.
No. And also, you must be tired. You came down from Woodstock to DC. Like, that's a full ass, like, yeah. That's a lot of trains. And also, and if you flew, like, there is no Albany to Reagan International or whatever. So,
and it's like also like Father Marin is like in the door. He's like, let's begin as soon as possible. Like, you want to sit down and have a cup of tea? No?
No.
Maybe get a bite to eat?
No.
No? You're just going to dive right into work? Okay.
Okay, so now we have kind of the culmination is hitting the climax of this film, which is they go back into the room upstairs. So I'm sorry. Marin and Caris go back upstairs into Reagan's room to start in again. But Marin sees how the demon is mocking his mother.
Yeah.
Caris's mother, and Caris cannot control himself. And Marin is like, you know what? Why don't you head to the bench? Take a break. I got this. And this is where Caris is downstairs telling Chris, like, listen, she's not going to die. We're in great hands. We're all good. The detective Detective Kinderman shows up at this point.
Oh my God, worst possible timing. You're like, listen, we're doing a thing upstairs. I don't know if we really have time for more.
How's tomorrow for you?
Yeah.
Maybe Thursday. Thursday's wide open for me.
Thursday's much better.
But Caris goes back upstairs after being like, listen, we're in great hands. He's going to do a
Mhm.
great job. And he goes back up there and he finds Marin just on the floor, dead of a heart attack.
Dead, like face down.
Dead.
Reagan is now cut free from her bonds, and she's just sort of like curled up watching the dead body.
Mm-hmm.
Horrifying. It's also like the way Reagan inexplicably moves around the room. Like we never see her get into any position. She's just kind of there.
Yeah.
And you sort of know exactly what happened,
Yeah.
even though she was, tied up before. Now she's untied.
Mm-hmm.
Horrifying.
Yeah. He now as she starts giggling, because
Yeah.
actually the
Yeah.
scene is really interesting
Caris is
because
trying to like CPR Father Marin.
yeah, and she is sitting up near the post of the bed, one of the posters of the bed, and she actually looks, she's got the green Pazuzu eyes, but she
Yeah.
also is looking shocked. She almost looks like a child
Yeah.
for a moment,
Yeah.
looking like, what did I just do? But that face slowly, this is where an incredible child actor, because her
Yeah.
face morphs very slowly into a grin and into giggling.
Yeah.
And he,
Caris, oh my God. He
yes,
punches
go
the
on.
fuck out of that girl. Like roundhouse jab, uppercut to the left, like just wails on her.
I, okay, this is a dark thought, but I think if you're a parent, you have to have gone through this moment, which is like you love your child, you would never ever physically harm your child or even threaten your child. But there has to be moments with children
You're like, I'm gonna
because
punch that kid.
you're like, I gotta think there are moments when this has to feel a little cathartic when you just
Yeah.
see Karis fucking lose it and be like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna beat the shit out of you like you're fucking like I'm Rocky Marciano,
Yeah.
basically. And he starts attacking Reagan, but he is shouting at the demon as he's punching it in Reagan's body, saying, take me, come into me.
Yeah.
And Pazuzu does.
I
Pazuzu's
mean,
like, great.
all
Love
right.
to take a priest's body. How
Yeah,
delightful.
great.
No, never has a priest ever said, here, please possess me. What? And we see his eyes go green, and he has a brief moment of controlling the demon before it fully takes over. And he just says, fuck it. Yeets
Yeah.
himself out this window.
Like he goes after Reagan for a second, but then turns back to good old Father Caris.
Mm-hmm.
And Caris, yeah, just fully through the window.
Down the stairs, the Georgetown steps.
Which I have
They,
been to. They still
oh
exist.
yeah,
As last
there's a
last I
plaque up
checked.
apparently. Yeah,
Oh, I don't
that
know.
notes that they were part of the Exorcist. Just in probably in the exact same way that Burke Dennings uh,
Yeah.
died out the
Except
window down
except
the
Father
steps
Caris went through the
through the
window,
window.
not out the window.
Yes. And before long, we've got police and media all outside this area surrounding the body. Reagan is now sobbing and asking for her mother and just um, seems to be back to being a normal child who
Yeah.
is having gone through a trauma, of course.
Yeah.
And Father Dyer shows up over Damien Caris's body and is doing last rites. I know that that's what he's doing, but it feels a little abrasive because not being a Catholic, I hope that if I'm dying and you're over me, Cecil, and your question to my dying form is, are you sorry for having offended God? Do you want to make a confession? I'll be like, what's your
That's the
fucking
last thing you hear.
deal?
That's
Yeah,
the
what's
last
your
thing.
yeah,
Well, I'm not a priest, so I
thank you.
promise you I won't do that.
Great. You'll be like, this is what you sound like.
I'm dying. Oh no.
Oh, look at me. I'm Jeffrey. Um, yeah. Oh, and this must be the scene where Friedkin slapped this
Yeah.
poor actor to be like, cry.
Yeah.
Now we get our epilogue. We get daytime. The stairwell is all cleaned up outside of the apartment. Chris and family are finally
They
moving
are
out.
out of there. They're like, fuck this movie, fuck this house.
Mm-hmm.
Goodbye.
And the young assistant at the house found up in that bedroom the little medallion of Saint Joseph,
which was Father Caris's.
which was Father Caris's, that you assume must have been ripped from his neck when
Yes.
when he fought the demon.
It's actually when the demon rips the medallion off his neck. That's like right afterwards is when he says, "Take me." So it's
Yeah.
like that last bit of protection goes away,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of allows the demon fully possess Caris.
Which ties into that same Saint Joseph's medallion in Iraq.
Because the idea is that it's of a different time period than the dig that they were doing. So somebody was possessed way
Mm-hmm.
back in the day,
Had that
and
medallion ripped off.
they
Yeah.
quote lost their faith
Mm-hmm.
in order for the possession to happen.
We also learn, Father Dyer is there to see Chris and Reagan off. Also, Chris does tell the young assistant, "You can keep that medallion. I'm good." And oh no, that's not what it is. She was like,
No,
I
like
think
the
she
assistant
does
finds
take it.
it.
Yeah,
This is Chris, and then Chris knows that it's Father Caris's, so gives it to
to
Father Dyer, just
Father
like, oh,
Dyer.
here's a memento of your dead priest
Right.
friend.
You're right. You're right. I think in my head, I was like, no, you keep it. I'm good.
No, thank you. You know what? I'd get me to Los Angeles, please.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need any souvenirs of my time in Georgetown.
Nope. The thing about going back to this is the end of the movie, but like going back to Detective Kinderman, because he shows up in this climactic scene
Yeah.
wherein we're going to watch a priest hurl himself out the window
Yeah.
and die, and we've got another priest dead on the floor.
Yeah.
So we've got two dead people, and we've got a child who is cut up to pieces, like
Yeah.
shredded, bruised, battered, in all kinds of, probably emaciated. Like who
Yeah.
knows what
Oh,
she's
yeah.
been eating,
Yeah.
and scarred that says "Help me" on her belly, and with the cop there during this final battle, and then we immediately go to the like, thank God she's okay. She doesn't remember any of this, and we get to move to, oh God, we're gonna live in, Santa Monica's beautiful. It's gonna be so lovely, and I'm like, wait, what happened to the police here? Because I think if I'm Detective Kinderman, I'm like, you don't get to leave. We have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
What have you been doing to your daughter?
And I think that's the big question that like is in the book of like what actually happened and how do you approach this from a secular point of view
Yeah.
when the crime, quote unquote, is spiritual in nature.
A lot of horror movies do the thing, and we ask a lot on the show. I'm like, I want to see the sequel of how the police clean this mess up.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's an
interestingly enough,
Mhm.
that is what The Exorcist 3 is kind of about.
Okay.
The
Interesting.
Exorcist 2 is one of those like weird, it's like Halloween 3. It's like one of the weird, oh my God, like The Exorcist 2, The Heretic is a delightful mess of a movie.
Mhm.
And The Exorcist 3 kind of goes back and is much more police procedural about that. Like kind
Okay.
of the rational questions of what the fuck happened that night. As a cop a few years later is like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like I've been handed this assignment. What the fuck is all of this?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think the conceit in most horror movies is like, just don't even introduce the cops into it. Just let the movie just be its own thing.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
we're always gonna have the questions of like, how do we clean up this fucking mess? But
Sure.
leave it alone. It's fine. But this one
But
actually
is
has
it
a
marked
cop
as like
there for
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And then we
Is
get
it
this
like, is it
epilogue.
suicide? Okay. So we have a heart attack. We have a suicide. And then we have another unsolved mystery.
Because I'm also like, child abuse? Like,
Yeah.
if I
Child.
walked,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. But yeah, they get to move to LA and it's lovely out there. All
Goodbye.
times of year. It's lovely in Los Angeles. And yeah, that's where our movie ends. Shall we rate this film, Cecil?
Yes, let's.
All right, so let's talk about just how approachable this is if you're horror movie averse. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not at all approachable, 10 being super approachable. I don't know, man. Like this is a pretty low approachability, right? Like 3 cocks sucked in hell.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on how much you buy the central premise. This movie has never gotten to me in any way, shape, or form, but it's certainly gross. I take that back. the medical scenes get to me in this movie. Like the medical scenes are
Yeah.
super traumatic, and the blood spurting thing is horrifying because you feel it. Like I
There's
felt it.
so yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And there's so many jump scares,
So
like
many, yeah, good
where you
solid
don't
jump
expect them,
scares.
like the candle flare in the attic.
Hmm.
You know, it's just it is unrelenting.
Yeah. And as you said, the sound in this movie is really intense. From the score to the sound effects to the jump scares, and also just the sheer tension of it. Like some of
Yeah.
what makes those medical scenes so hard is the sound of that whatever giant MRI type of thing, of like industrial hammering sounds.
Yeah.
They're like those in and of themselves aren't scary or gory, but it doesn't let you relax.
Harsh.
Harsh. Let's say 3 out of 10 in terms of approachability. Like I don't know, not for the non-expert in horror approachability. But let's talk about just as a horror movie overall, Cecil. Where do you rate this?
I mean, as a horror film, like you gotta give this like a at least 9 out of 10, if
Yeah.
not 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
You know, split pea soup covered Catholic vestments.
Yeah.
Just because it like literally I read something that in England, like when this movie came out, they would literally bus people in from the villages. Like this movie had such buzz around it. Like it created so many people wanted to see this movie. People were fainting, for throwing up. The Catholic Church banned it. Like it's just crazy. The
Hmm.
things that happen, or not the Catholic Church, but like other religious groups banned this movie. It like this movie has such an influence. It is considered one of the classiest horror movies ever made. Like it is an Academy Award nominated. It shows like where horror can go in the prestige world of filmmaking. And I
Yeah.
think, love it or hate it, or maybe some people, I think I might knock it down to a 9 because it is a bit of a slow burn.
Yeah.
Like you have to invest in the first hour and 40 minutes of this movie in order to get to the last 20 minutes of
Yeah.
like pure horror.
Totally.
But it does that in a way that horror movies just kind of don't do anymore, or don't do very often anymore.
No, and it is such like it's such a big dramatic piece. Like he's just the director of the French Connection, right? Like this, I
Yeah,
mean,
like it's gritty. It's like gritty,
and
like
it's taut. Even if it's a slow burn, it is
realism.
a taut slow burn.
Yeah. When it's
And
also filled
yeah.
with like the acting style is so different. Like, everything nowadays sort of shorthands the exorcist journey, the exorcism journey. We're like, oh, this kid's acting weird. Get in a fucking priest. Bring me a young priest and old priest. And we've kind of shorthanded it because this movie legit spelled it out,
Uh-huh.
did it right. And there's kind of now everybody's like, well, we can't really, they kind of done did it over here.
Yeah. And it introduced the concept of exorcism into the mainstream. Because
Yeah.
there's a moment where this movie, Caris is having to explain an exorcism, which we would
Yeah.
never have to do today
Yeah.
because we've had so many horror movies about an exorcism. Yeah, incredible. Yeah, I think 9 to 10, somewhere in that range is absolutely fair. It's a seminal horror film. Like
Yeah.
it's upon which many others have
It's a
been
seminal
based.
horror film and a seminal film as
Film,
well.
yeah,
So,
correct. Okay, well, let's figure out what movie we are going to watch next. You have a scare die, I have a style die, and we'll roll those two up and see what movie matches those two things. So, on your scare die, Cecil, our next movie, if you roll a 1, has to die. The scare has to be isolation. But 2, planes, trains, and automobiles. 3, a psycho killer. 4, Mother Earth is the scare. 5, clowns or dolls. Or 6, aliens is our scare.
That's a 2.
Gonna get that planes, trains, and automobiles.
Ooh,
All right, we're
fun.
gonna match that with the style that I roll. If we roll a 1, our style has to be a film made in the Southern Hemisphere. 2, LGBTQ plus, meaning LGBTQ plus director, characters, and or storyline, not just that it's campy.
Yes.
Although some of these categories we'll see. It's kind
Yeah.
of having to bend a little
We might
bit,
have to
but
stretch a little bit.
3 is wild card, whatever planes, trains, and automobile movie we want. 4, period piece. 5, something from the 1990s. Or 6, something with an urban big city setting. So let's see what we match up here. That's a 4, a period piece. Planes, trains, and automobile. This is gonna be a tight
Interesting.
one. Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I think we have we have a few solid ideas, and we'll see
Sure.
what other people suggest over on Letterboxd.
All right, so yeah, let's pull up what Letterboxd folks. So we're at Random Horror 9 on Letterboxd, and we keep a bunch of lists that just give all possible matchups between the die rolls that we could have. And we have some really, really wonderful followers who contribute on those lists to give us more ideas for movies that we could do. But I'll tell you the ones I put on here, and they all kind of have question marks to them.
Yes.
One is Snowpiercer, definitely a period piece because it's
Set in the
dystopian future.
Sure.
That's a period of when
Yeah.
it was not happening.
Yes.
Another one that I put on here is Christine, but the movie primarily is present day 1980s, though the prologue of the film
Yeah.
is like 1950. So it flashes back 30 years to set up the movie.
Yes.
Does
And
that?
it has a yeah, it's I can absolutely see that, but it is not, is it technically not really technically a period piece.
No, it just has
It has a sense, it has that 1950s sensibility about it.
Yes. And then another one I put on here is Riding the Bullet, which is
I've never heard of this.
I don't know how well received or how good this movie is. This is based off of Stephen King.
Ooh, I'm looking at like this is a 2-star kind of joint right here.
Yeah, it looks like at least the Just Watch rating is 48%. It is a 2004 film. Here's the synopsis. Let me pause for ambulance. Here's the Just Watch synopsis. In 1969, while studying at the University of Maine, artist Alan Parker becomes obsessed with death. Believing he is losing his girlfriend, he tries to commit suicide on his birthday, but his friends manage to stop him. He receives news that his mother had a stroke and decides to hitchhike to visit her at the hospital. So the hitchhiking is where I stretch to be like planes, trains, and automobiles.
Okay.
Because I think the hitchhiking sounds like it's part of the adventure
definitely,
of
and
the
takes
story.
place in the automobile.
Yeah. So that's all I really came up with. Period piece, planes, trains, and automobiles. Let's see what Letterboxd had to say.
Well, kicking it off, King and Commoner recommends Final Destination 5, which is a prequel to the original. So, you know, that's like 5 years. It's kind of looking back in time.
Sure.
Let's see. Weaponized Toaster has Death Proof, citing the idea that it looks like the 1970s grindhouse flick. And aside from some minor clues, you can't really tell what time period it is. So definitely, it's got a lot of cars, a lot of automobiles in there. Ganymede's Cup recommends Wrong Turn 4. We're getting deep in the sequels here. An American slasher film from Declan O'Brien, a prequel to the original Wrong Turn film. College students get lost in a storm during their snowmobiling trip and take shelter in an abandoned sanitarium, which, unbeknownst to them, is home to deformed cannibals. Opens in 1974.
Yeah, that's the vehicle. Yeah. Okay.
This is another one that kind of opens in 1974, mainly set in 2003, made in 2000. So it kind of has the Christine sort of thing of like a heavy setup back in the past. Squin recommends Godzilla -1, which is kind of an interesting idea. So it's like a movie from 2023 that takes place in World War II.
It does deal with
there's definitely a lot of airplanes in that movie.
And the central character is a kamikaze pilot who abandoned his mission.
Yeah, a lot of boats, a lot of, and I'll extend to boats, trains, planes, automobiles, and steamers.
Yeah, vehicular scare.
Vehicular. Sure. Fifth Hammer seconds Riding the Bullet. So I don't know, somebody out there, Fifth Hammer is into Riding the Bullet.
Okay.
Atheros recommends Shadow in the Cloud from 2020. A
Huh.
female pilot boards a B-17 Flying Fortress with a mysterious package and witnesses a strange creature in the air. Ooh,
Whoa.
sounds mysterious and interesting.
Oh, this looks
Let's
really
see.
interesting.
Chuckanut.
Chuckanut. Yep.
Chuckanut. Let's see. If you
Oh no,
include
it's this
spaceships,
Chuckanut. It is Chuckanut. Yeah.
Chuckanut.
Chuckanut.
Sorry, like a little, just a touch of dyslexia.
Yeah.
Um, recommends okay if you put spaceships and planes, trains, and automobiles. Pandorum, an astronaut awakens from hypersleep, finds a ship in complete chaos, and there's creatures roaming around, killing and eating any humans that they find, and a few crazy people hold up trying to survive. Which this one, like I think I have seen this one, but I remember very little about it. I remember it being like pretty intense though. So like
Yeah.
I don't know, a spaceship is just an airplane that goes fast higher than an airplane,
Yeah.
right?
And it's
I,
happening
I,
at a period in the
I
future.
buy that. Okay, Jacob Chipman, also a bit of a stretch. The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, 1964. Schlocky, very, we're at the British Museum. We can do whatever we want. But the mummy looks pretty cool. The titular mummy is transported to Britain by ship, technically a vehicle, but not a train, plane, or automobile. Um, oh, the horror. Seconds Pandorum.
Uh-huh.
Let's see, Martin. If you include bicycles, translates on automobile. Turbo Kid is a fantastic post-apocalyptic action horror with some comically gory set pieces and a ton of low-budget spirit. Okay, so again, like kind of future period piece.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Oh, Katura recommends Horror Express, which we have covered for this show. Go back into the archives. We
Oh,
have
that's
done
right.
Horror
Yeah,
Express with
that's
Christopher Lee
true.
and Peter. C. Flesher, 82, recommends Mad Max. Definitely automobiles, definitely
Near future. Yeah.
near future kind of vibes. And Volatant Spider, Seconds Christine. We don't have a lot of like this is a if you squint kind of pairing, I feel.
Yeah, we've gotten real lucky with our die rolls lately, but we've definitely landed on one that's a little tough.
It's like
Um,
you can fit half the brief, but maybe not all. Like I would love to watch Christine again. Like I've not seen
I
that movie since I was like a
I
teenager.
I
I'd love to
think.
watch
Yeah.
Snowpiercer again.
Uh-huh.
I've not seen it since it came out.
Yes.
And I think honestly, out of all these suggestions, like Death Proof is kind of an interesting idea because even though it is quote modern day, it really, it's a Tarantino joint, so it tries really hard to look like it's the 1970s.
Yeah. I feel like the spirit of going to the scare and of the style, the spirit
Yeah.
of the scare is that thing, the plane, train, or automobile or overall vehicle
Yeah.
is the scary thing.
Yes. Yes. Which is
I
why like Godzilla minus one is a great suggestion, but the
The
scare is
planes aren't
Godzilla.
scary. The
Yeah.
scare is Godzilla. And I think Christine fits that the best.
Yeah.
Snowpiercer too, because the train is
Yeah.
designed as the horrible place in which we all live.
Yeah.
So those two fit. And I think in terms of the spirit of period piece is something theoretically in the past. I think
Mhm.
future works. I think we did Event Horizon for the show because of period piece
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and
So
Alien. I
we've
think
already
we
done
got
the retro future. We've already done it's a period.
I,
It's
yeah,
2095.
I think we had gotten like Aliens plus period piece, and we're like, oh, woof.
Oh, Jesus, how are we gonna
Um,
do this? I think Christine, because it like there's something about the movie that it feels very 1950s outsiders.
yeah, and it
It's
does
got that.
technically hit on. It does have a period piece moment to at least start the movie.
You know what? Good enough in my book.
It's good enough for me, and I've never seen this movie. I've read the
You've
book.
never seen it?
I've
Well,
never
I've
seen
never
the
read the
movie.
book.
Okay. It's not my favorite Stephen King book, but also
Okay.
like your favorite Stephen King book isn't always your favorite Stephen King movie, so it doesn't
Right.
matter.
And this is a John Carpenter, so
I'm
we
so
know
excited.
we're in very, very strong hands here.
Yes, agree. Well, let's do it. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Cecil, for talking with me. If you have thoughts on The Exorcist or ideas for other movies that would have been good Planes, Trains, and Automobiles meets period piece horror. Let us know on Instagram at Random Horror 9 or over on Patreon, where we have public discussion threads for each episode, and you do not have to be a paying member to participate. And watch Christine, I believe this is from 1983, with us this week. And come on back next Tuesday for a new episode. Have a restful night with no snake-dicked demons ruining your desert vacation or nothing. Boo.
Boo.